Well, good morning, guys, and welcome to the Kavod Family Podcast. This is Casey Wilson, and we have Run the Gauntlet, guys.
Danny Antoine.
Justin Bohner.
And Travis.
If you don't know these guys, man, I could boast in them and tell you stories all day long. Danny, he's a local a chaplain, a commissioner, a pastor, a karate instructor who runs a local karate studio.
I got like 30 jobs. That's awesome.
But mainly he is working himself into the role as a town father, a man that's just loved and appreciated and trusted, and we love Danny. Justin's a good brother. He has been with us, for 5-10 years now. We've known each other.
Like 5 or 6.
Grown up here in Franklin in Macon County, and God has just done an incredible work in his life and his family with his children, and now he's living the life of a pastor and a content creator for Kavod Family and running through life with us, and it's just good to have you, brother.
Amen.
And you guys know Travis. Man, I don't have much to say
that
about
pause?
this.
My gosh. I think it's forced or something.
Don't know if there's so much or so little to say.
No, come on. If you know Travis, you probably know him from the fitness center that him and his wife Lydia created, Kavod Family or Kavod Fitness, and it has been a standard in this community just for faith and family and friendship and fun and hard work, and we're just grateful for it, man.
You know, I just thought about something. You know, when I go back and watch these, every time I drink out of my coffee cup, my face probably looks crazy. Now, you hear people talk about, we make coffee, it's like motor oil. No. Yeah. Okay, for the viewers at home, I think this is what motor oil really tastes like.
Give me that. That's some good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry we don't put sugar and milk and
Gotta
cream.
make your voice dropping.
Don't even try to play
coffee.
me out like that. This is motor oil. Like, ain't
way-
no taste to it. It's
That's
just
the way Paul drank it.
Yeah. Oh, man, I'm making a mess.
way to go.
Well, we are jumping into, this is part 3 of a 4-part series on kind of some building blocks that we've had running through our mind, our heart for years now. Identity called Forge Reign. It's 4 blocks. It's just a way to be able to examine yourself, to self-assess, and see kind of where you stand in every area of life. In business, as a man, as a husband, as a father. There's a point where you got to sit down and take stock whether or not I'm actually fulfilling the roles of a father. Where do those roles come from? They come from God, right? He's the one that gives them to us. Then I go through this process where he's got to actually take my heart, my mind, my actions, my time, my money, everything about me, and change it so it actually serves his purpose. And that's what we're going to get into today, that forging process of becoming what God wants us to become. And then ultimately, it's the process of reigning, right? Actually getting to that place where we're walking in the shadow of our Father in a way where we can look at others and say, follow me as I follow Christ. That's the goal.
Well, that's the whole point that we kept tossing around is what do we say there? 4 virtues, 4 qualities, 4 seasons. That's a stupid word that people overuse, 4 seasons. But we really looked at 4 pillars. And the reason why we keep coming back to 4 pillars is because think about the 4 posts holding up the roof of a house. What happens if you take out one of those pillars?
Yeah. That sucker's coming down.
Oh, it's coming down, buddy. Right? And so if you have to have those 4 things, so just to you viewers who maybe are jumping in on this podcast and haven't listened to the 2 previous episodes where we talked about identity and calling, it's really necessary for you to go back and look at those because part of these 4 pillars is we're not leaving the others behind to go into this next phase. It's a building process. All 4 of these work together, and if you don't see it that way, you're going to be missing the overall picture. I just thought that was a good
But also,
PSA.
What's cool, what you've talked about with the black belt is eventually as they put on the black belt over and over and over, it wears off and it's white again. The idea of like as you discover your identity, you step into whatever it is, whether you're a business owner, a dad, a husband, whatever it is, you step into a calling that God has put on you. And then in the forging process, you're discovering how God created you. And a lot of people, they shift the verbiage here, like, all these hard things made me who I was. I think that's garbage. I think the hard things allowed you to discover how God originally made you. Without
Burning off
sin,
the dross.
without flaw, without the fall of man, right? And then you start to reign. And if you look at this cycle, you should first govern it in yourself. And then you start to say, okay, like the first initial forging process is horrible. It is painful. It is miserable. But once you get it, you're like, oh, I'm doing it as a dad now. I'm doing it as a grandpa now. I'm doing it as a business owner. And you start to rinse and repeat. You will always be in your identity. Not only should it be the foundational piece, but like as I became a father, I had a new weight to my identity.
Yeah.
As I become a grandfather, I'll have a new weight to my identity. A business owner, there's a new weightiness in it. My calling will have different flavors in different areas of my life, different seasons of my life. I use the season word. Forging is going to change. Like me leading myself and my wife and my kids and then maybe one or two coaches. Okay, I got a grasp on that. Now we've merged businesses and there's multiple people. My time is very like finite with each person. I'm like, holy crap, I'm in the forging again of learning how to manage this calling well. So you're always in them all the time.
So it's not, the squeeze creates something and then I discover who I am.
Waterloo.
It's that the squeeze actually, yeah, that's what that was. It's that
Sold them out.
The sanctification process restores or brings out what's truly underneath, right? The sun comes to fruition.
How he created you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it because we're so in a culture that talks about reaction or results, right? Rather than looking back at calling and identity. Those are different.
Yeah, and if you think about it, it's a perfect plan to steal the glory from God. That's how he made Casey. These hard things didn't create Casey because then you're putting the value in the circumstances that created that versus the one who gave you the circumstances to call that out of you.
Yeah, very good.
You think of it differently when you go into it like that. When you're suffering and it sucks, and like if any man has a life that is not in a season of suck, then you need to go find it because it produces something in you, and you start to see like, gosh, okay, God, like I didn't think that was possible. Like how many times men or women come into the gym and they grab a weight that they're comfortable with in the workout. They know I can manage this and I can be safe. At the beginning, I'm like, perfect. I want you to be safe.
Why are you looking at us?
I wasn't thinking of anybody in particular.
Justin's like,
But once they learn how to be safe, then I'm going to constantly push more weight. And they always leave. They could care less what weight that they lift, but they're like, I didn't think I had that. I didn't think I could do that for that long. I didn't think I could keep that tempo. And it's like, good. Discover that you have more. Yeah. And you grab this principle in a gym and cool, it's fun. But the idea is that you take that principle out of the gym, out of the karate floor, whatever it is, and go stick it in your marriage. Go stick it in with being a father. Go stick it in reading your Bible. Like, take that principle everywhere.
Men everywhere, learn how to love a forging process. I love that process. And even as a trainer, when I train people, I never train somebody without putting myself through some kind of craziness to make sure that when I'm getting onto somebody, I'm in it with you. I feel that pain already. You know what I'm saying? And people respond differently when you have that. What's in a forging process? I'll use fighting obviously as an example. Many fighters will wait till they get into the ring to figure out like how good they are and what it is. You're too late. You're way, way too late. Okay? What you do is everything, you got to recreate the worst possible scenarios in training. You don't wait till you get in the ring. You make training suck. You want it to be the worst thing ever. So by the time you get in the ring, whatever comes at you, it's like, this is where I live. You know what I'm saying? You want everybody else to be unprepared, right? So that's why when everybody else is sleeping, you're working. When everybody else is eating, you're working. When everybody else is hanging out, you're working. That's the process of training a fighter. I have one of our guys that we're training right now for an amateur match. And that's we actually talked about that this morning. I told him the reason why I do this to you is because I'm not waiting for you to get in the ring to figure out what you're made of. If you don't know what you're made of before you get in that ring, I failed you and you failed yourself, honestly, at that point. You do the work in training. Every bit of adversity, every loss, every win. You experience everything every day in training, not once, every day, till that's your lifestyle. So now when you get in that ring, and a big Goliath shows up, guess what? You're ready. What qualified David for Goliath? It's the same thing that's going to qualify all of us, right? David slew giants it was in a private time. There was nobody around. That's what qualified him to be able to do it publicly.
Yeah.
We forget what's supposed to happen in the private time.
But
and we want
literally,
to just jump out publicly.
to clarify that, in case someone hasn't read David's story, I don't know his age, as a young boy, young man, killed a lion and a bear.
And a bear.
Solo.
He was
Him,
sub 15.
him with sheep.
yeah.
So, like, when he had that confidence and that assurance, so when he stepped onto the battlefield with two armies, he was like, this is no different. Like, God is my pride. Like, this is the same thing, just different scales.
And it's the same thing no matter what sphere of life. And that taught me a lot in every area of my life. Like, I use that in everything. In business, relationships, it doesn't matter. In the training is where it happens. You put everything out there. You find out exactly who you are, what you're made of in training. So by the time the season comes up, the battles come up, you've already fought so many of them. It's a part of the natural genetic makeup of you at that point. But if you're waiting till you get in the battle, you are way too late. Just like any fighter. And fighters out there understand that. If you're waiting till you get in a match to figure out what you're made of, to understand how good you are, how bad you are, what you can take, you're already behind the ball. You're not going to make it amongst the ones who are sitting at the top of the food chain.
So how do you fall in love with this process that is, iron sharpens iron, sanctification, right? The forging, the training, the grind, the process of actually being refined, because that whole process, it breaks a man down. It shows you that you're proud. It shows you
build a history.
You know what I mean?
You build a history.
Okay.
What makes me love this right now is because I now have a history with the Father. The first time is the only time where you don't have a history. But once you get through the first time, what's going to happen is you see the results of it. When you see the results of it, you don't just say, oh, man, this is awesome. No, don't forget how you got those results, because you're going to have to do it again. And again, and again. You'll have to do it with your family. Men, fight for your families. Fight for your wives. Fight for your kids.
So,
it's hard. It's tough.
I want to zoom in between these 2 points here, because I feel like we're expressing the value in it, and then it's starting to, like, how do you enjoy it? I want to give a different example. Fighting, there's not many people who fight. And, I mean, there are. But, like, once you grab a hold of the principle isn't just fighting in a ring. It's enjoy. Like, what did David Faulkner quoted, another guy who made the quote, being a man is joyfully suffering. Come on.
Oh, you're talking about.
He brought it up.
You're
Who
talking
said
about the
Dougie
famous
Fresh.
Wilson quote. Yeah.
Send it. What is it?
It is. It's the responsibility of man quote, right? Mm-hmm.
Being a man is the glad assumption of sacrificial responsibility.
All right, say it again slower.
Being a man is the glad assumption of sacrificial responsibility.
Trav, I want to say something to something you just said real quick. You said not everybody fights. No, everyone does.
That's what I want to clarify.
And here's what I want to clarify in that. If you look at the Bible from Genesis all the way through to Revelation, God always speaks in war language. That means we were created for war at some capacity. We were created for battles. So everyone at some point, somewhere in your life, there's a battle that you're having to fight. You're going to find out whether or not you're an actual fighter or somebody who fights. Somebody who fights goes to tournament to win trophies. A fighter doesn't know how to do it any other way. A fighter doesn't understand quit. A fighter doesn't understand stop. You see what I'm saying?
But see, that's what I want to dive into is we've been lulled to sleep where we are here. Yeah. And men will look at pornography. They'll play on their phone instead of play with their kids. We have been lulled to sleep that there's not a war. And when you talk about fighting, they think, oh, karate. Yeah, I don't do karate. I don't fight. And I want to paint the picture that every decision that you make is part of war. It is a battlefield. It is a battleground. And you need to choose God and choose and enjoy, which we'll get to, how to enjoy the suffering part of it.
So that's where that quote comes in, the glad assumption. That's what you're getting at. Like, how do you joyfully, happily, how do you take the responsibility that's in front of you to fight, to war, to achieve, to win? Like, how do you get a heart that wants that, right?
Well, Paul describes this forging process for himself at the end of 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Beginning in verse 24, he says, "Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it," right? That's victory, trying hard, battling language. "Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wealth, but we an imperishable." Now, here's the best part. "So I do not run aimlessly." Yeah. Exactly what you're talking about. How many men are running around with no direction? They're not running a race, right? They're out jogging in the woods. like a bunch of
Absolutely.
morons. They're not running a race. So I do not run aimlessly. Here you go, Danny. I do not box as one beating the air. Now, this is the best part. But I discipline my body. And the ESV says keep it under control. It really means
bring it
I
into
pummel
subjection.
my body and make it a slave, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. He's talking about putting himself in the forging process, right? He's putting himself into that forging process physically, spiritually, mentally, knowing that for him to be the man of God that God has called him to be, he has to be in that, right? I just think that's an important distinction to see there, that the Bible is not silent about what we are to be doing and how we are to be living.
It's not silent at all. And I mean, again, look at the language that he's using in that. And in this last verse, he says, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection. That's an active part of it. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about what's the joyful part of it, anybody who works out, do you not like when you get the results? Yes, the workout is hard, but don't you like it when your body starts to change? Don't you like it when you realize you're getting stronger? You know what I mean? Don't just like the end result. Enjoy the process. If without that process, you don't get the result. You teach yourself how to love it by understanding that you cannot have that end result without the process. Now, again, when you build a history with it, that's the joy, right? It sounds weird to say, but yes, I love to put my body through crazy things because I know what the end result is, but more importantly, I know what it does for others. It's kind of like talking to the young man this morning. You know, when I told Chris, I said, all this you're doing right now, you're not doing this for you. You told me you want to be good, you want to get to Golden Glove. Well, the reason why you're doing all this is actually not for you. God gave you this gift for others. So ultimately, what does it say? I beseech you, therefore, brethren, to present your bodies a living sacrifice. Yeah. Right? How do you do that? A living, and then he ends that by saying, which is your reasonable service, which means what? That's the least that you can do.
So you're connecting it back to last week because in order to place yourself on that altar, you've got to believe that God, one, has something greater for you, two, that you're not there yet. Right? Like this is why we go through the forging. Yeah. You're admitting that there's more he wants to draw out.
You always got to know that
greater in me.
You always got to know that there's more. One of the things I love about martial arts for us is you guys have all seen, you get to your next belt, what do we do? If you're 13 years old and up, you have to take a kick for your next belt level. Yeah. And the closer you get to your black belt, the harder the kick. It's a sign of humility for us. But it's also always a reminder to let you know, no matter how hard you're training, there's always somebody out there training harder than you. So you stay humble. You always stay on the grind. You never go through the martial arts and think you've learned everything. You will go a lifetime and still never learn everything, right? So is that not the same? Mm-hmm. Just a little bit, there's a whole lot deeper with the Word of God?
So I love this. There's two things going on here, and I want to clearly distinguish the two separate things. And then let's provide examples for it. So for us to willingly suffer in the forging process, most men are going to grab a hold of this in a physical standpoint. Right. Jesus taught in parables, right? So the athlete, and then here he gives an example of war again. In 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 3, it says, share in suffering as a good soldier of Christ Jesus. So the understanding that, like, for you, whether you're working out, whether it's a sport, whether it's your job, you are to suffer. Ecclesiastes talks about nothing is better than a man to enjoy a hard day's work.
That was 2 Timothy what?
Chapter 2, verse 3. And then if you look here in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 9, for you remember, brothers, our labor and toil, we worked night and day that we might not burden any of you while we proclaim to you the gospel of God. So Paul saw it as like a given, like this is elementary that we will work. I will be a tent maker. I will not place a burden on you while I share the Lord. And then Ecclesiastes talks about work. 2 Timothy talks about suffering. It talks about training like an athlete. So men, the way that you begin to understand the greater prize is your life is a sacrifice for Jesus. You're to love him, you're to serve him, and in fruit of that, you begin to reign, you begin to love others, and you begin to bring others into this. But it starts with a craft that you do in the physical. You did carpentry, you build houses. There is a suck factor to being in the rain, to waking up early. Your joints hurt. Like, that is good. And you start to understand. You should, if you think beyond just hammering nails and picking up a barbell, if you think deeply about anything, you'll understand, wow, when it gets hard in a workout, I want to step back and rest because this is uncomfortable. When you can figure out, no, this is good. I need to find my boundaries. I need to see how hard I can push. I need to make myself pick it up. There's moments where I find that sweet spot. I'm like, I want to rest. I'm like, pick it up. And I'm like, no, I need a break. I'm like, no, you don't pick it up. And like, I love that because to me, it's not cool. I got a good workout. I'm getting stronger. No, that principle. So yesterday, this is not to toot my own horn, but this is how it carries over, man. I got up at 4 a.m., coach class, had meetings all day. I taught one of the later classes. I left the gym at like 8 o'clock. So got up at 4 a.m., left the gym at like 7:30, got home at like 8 o'clock. And then my daughter and wife were doing volleyball. Reed's home, and I had ran around with Reed a little bit during the day trying to be active dad and not here all day. It's 8 o'clock. I'm getting up at 4 a.m. He's like, can we go to the skate park? It's dark, and the skate park is covered in puddles, and he doesn't have anything really to ride with it. And I was like, I want to sit down. And God's like, go. And I'm like, go? It's dark. It's wet. I haven't eaten dinner. And I was like, Reed's been being a little turd lately. And I was like, he needs dad time. And I was like, he probably is not going to do it long. And God's like, go. So I get in the truck and I drive over and I'm like, I'm freaking annoyed. I'm the same moment of pick up the barbell. No, I don't want to. Pick up the barbell. No, I don't want to. And we get there and I'm like, dude, we're not staying long. It's dark. There's puddles everywhere. But like, go tear it up. He literally did like 3 little laps. Oh my gosh, Dad, thanks so much, Dad. You're the best dad ever. And the whole way home, Dad, you're amazing. Dad, dad, dad. And I'm like sitting there and I'm like, okay, God, I get it. Like, it's not supposed to be easy. Like, you're supposed to find yourself in him in those moments. Yep. And then once you do, you start to enjoy it and you realize it's not about me.
So you're making the transition here because the real grind, the real forging is not necessarily just a muscle thing.
Ooh, that's the easy part.
That's that is the easy part, but it teaches you for other areas, especially with your family.
But let's not discount that, right? Strength is a virtue of Christ. It's a virtue of God, and he wants us to walk in it.
But that is the elementary, like I'm saying, and not discrediting this. Like, that's a given. Like, if you rewind time 100 years ago, that's what men did. Men's hands were calloused and weathered, and their skin was like just tan. Like, they did manual things. They did hard things, and we don't now. Like, everything has to be comfortable, and in that, it diminishes the weightiness of what we do in our spiritual life because it's a parable.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I've seen too is it seems like it's our knee-jerk reaction to when we are in that forging process and when the fire is hot and when, as this verse I'm about to read is kind of drawing on, when we feel like the lights are out, per se, right? When you're in that forging process, sometimes you feel very alone, right? You feel like God is punishing you by putting you in that moment. But listen to what it says here in Isaiah chapter 50, verse 10. Who among you fears the Lord and obeys the voice of his servant? That's Christ. Let him who walks in darkness and has no light trust in the name of the Lord and rely on his God. Then he goes on to say, behold, all you who kindle a fire, who equip yourselves with burning torches, right? Who go out and try to get out of the forging, try to get out of the darkness on their own. He says, walk by the light of your fire and by the torches that you've kindled. This you have from my hand, you shall lie down in torment. What that's saying is the forging and the darkness, God is like, I want you there. I want you to not be able to trust your body. I want you to not be able to trust your own effort in this forging process. How many times is David like, God, what is going on? I'm in the middle of the desert. I'm hiding in a cave. I'm sleeping on a rock. But what does he say?
What am I doing?
What does he say? He says, with joy, I will sing with joy under the shadow of your wings, right? Because he knows that in that forging process, God is with him and God has him there for a reason. That's what it's saying. You're walking in the darkness because God put you there. You're walking in the fire because God put you there. And what do you do in those moments of the forging? What do you do? It says right here, trust in the name of the Lord and rely on your God. That's when you have that past. You look back and you say, God is faithful. God brought me into this. God brought me into this for a reason. He'll see me through this because he wants me to press on towards the upward
Get
goal.
out of comfort zone. You know, you said about us being like very comfortable all the time. John Wesley, is he not like one of the heroes, right? It says John Wesley transformed the known world of his time. He preached 40,000 sermons in his lifetime. He traveled 250,000 miles by horseback. He worked with over 15 different languages, had over 600 publications, and at the age of 83, he was angry with his doctor because his doctor wouldn't let him preach more than 14 times a week.
He taught himself those languages on horseback also.
At the age of 86, in his journal were written these words: laziness is slowly creeping in. There's an increasing tendency to stay in bed after 5:30 in the morning. What this is the kind of stuff that makes you look and say, "What am I doing with my life?" Right?
Get your life together.
Let me ask you this, because John Wesley has so many. You could write books, and people have written books on the incredible things that man did. His vice was he offered his family as a sacrifice in order to achieve these things. His wife and his kids. That was his vice.
His vice,
right? And so it's that wrestle of how do you do that and not sacrifice the things that are also most important, right?
So Justin just reigned something.
Raining.
That's the key, right?
Listen to this. No one engaged in warfare entangles himself with the affairs of this life.
Ooh.
No, this is in 2 Timothy, right after this same scripture. No one engaged in warfare entangles himself with the affairs of this life. In that time of warfare, war is not for a lifetime. Do you see what I'm saying? In order for you to hit the top of anything, you have a period of time where, yes, you're going to have to separate, but it's a short period of time. Yeah. But what you have to have in balance is when you come out of that, and you have to come out of that time, then you go back and invest in your family and all these other areas. You don't stay there. The mistake a lot of people do is they stay right there. Oh, I'm always on the grind. I'm always on the grind. No, you're always on the grind until when? Just like you did yesterday. Mm-hmm. You're on the grind all day, but even in the middle of that grind, what'd you do? You took the time to be a dad, so it's possible and it can be done. And at the end of your day, that grind is over. You decide you want to go to bed, then your boy comes to you, right? Dad, take me to the skate park.
Yeah.
So you made a decision. You took yourself out of the warfare. You did what you were supposed to do, your number one calling in your life, which is for your family. Then you wake up the next day, you get back in that war again.
But what's cool is as you mature in this and you start to reign, me coming home after the gym and then Reed saying, hey, I want to go skate park, that's the greater warfare. Like arrows in the hand of a skilled warrior are like children of one's youth. He is, and my daughter and my wife, my greatest legacy. For me to steward them well, to fall in love with God, whether they save one person or whether God just has them behold God and love God. Like, I want him to love God. That's my aim. That is the better warfare. That is why I learn this and study this, is to then be able to teach him this. So, like, all the things that I did throughout the day were the precursor to that moment. Mm-hmm. You know? So in that, like, when you begin to reign, and I'm not saying I'm reigning, there's like different seasons of it and layers of it. You see, like, wow, the gym is giving me, it's the shadow boxing, it's Chris doing Spider-Man push-ups for an hour. That is the buy-in to the bigger fight.
Yeah.
That is. I don't know if I've ever said this to you, but as one of our sons, you're one of my greatest legacies. One of my absolute favorites as well. Meaning, I don't put you above any of the other kids, but for watching you grab a hold of what God did from the very beginning, I can go through that story and repeat it over and over again to people. I share that testimony so much, man. You are one of my greatest legacies ever, just to see you grab a hold of just sitting at a table with you, going from that, digging into the Word of God, to the many conversations that we had over the phone, in person,
Yeah.
and then to see everything that you're doing right now. And then I see you with Reed, and then I watch Reed grabbing a hold of this thing. Like, there's nothing like it. Men, you have your sons and your daughters. Don't neglect that.
Yeah.
Like, and let's not neglect to tell them. And again, I apologize if I've never really said that to you. Even
No, you have.
publicly, but
Thank you.
That's you're a powerful man.
But
It's
to-
not real quick though. It's not like a value of one over the other.
No.
It's the First John thing. I have no greater joy than to see my sons walk in truth. Yeah. And when you get to look at him, there's a joy that you receive knowing this man
Majorly.
is fulfilling the call of God, not my call, but the call of God on his life.
And
That's
to be
huge.
able to decipher this, though, just so you guys can understand, like we went and played pickleball the other day, and my son was like laying on the floor because his sister was beating him, pitching a fit. Like, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. And it's like the platforms and the timing and the situations of my son stressing about a test in school and maybe he gets a bad grade. I can help him study, which is elementary, like, get involved. But then I can teach him, hey, like, this test is not the end all be all. This is not your identity. This is not your calling. This is part of your forging. You're learning how to study. You're learning how to study.
Yeah.
The bigger aim is God. So, like, all of these things that anybody goes through, it's just a platform to teach the greater aim.
So let's dive into this, because I think, and you guys can help me, the goal, the aim, if you're in a forging process and you're wondering why, what am I here for? What am I in this grind for? I would sum that up as saying it's not the exercise of something external. It's developing the internal. It's learning not to be governed by the hardships around you, the emotions that I feel, the things that people are saying about me, but it's centering my identity on Christ and fulfilling what he's called me to. Right? It's finding out what God is saying in this situation and running after that rather than what everything around me is saying. That's the goal of you can't reign until you have learned to walk in his voice, right? To hear his voice and walk in that. And so that I think that's that transition from being a boy into being a man, is you're learning to get your identity and your value right in God, right? And we see that in David. Can we just banter about David for just a moment? Right around the story of Goliath, that whole process. Yeah. I mean, here you have two nations that are coming against each other in war, right? Saul, he's the newly elected, chosen king, right? Israel wanted to have a king like the nations. Give us a king like the nations, they cry out, right? And God gives them their king, knowing that this is going to be terrible for them. And they go to war. And that man, does he have faith? Does he have? No. He's a coward, right? They even find him at one point hiding in the luggage cases. He's afraid. He walks in this fear. And so the Philistines have come against Israel, and they send this man Goliath out for war. And what it is send your champion, we'll send our champion. Whoever wins, then the rest will be slave to the victor, right? And it's this moment. What's the difference between the people of fear, David or David's brothers, the rest of Israel? What's the difference between them and David? What is it about this young shepherd boy that does what no one else did? The scriptures talk about how everyone else is filled with fear, right? They're all afraid. I'm just chime in. Like, what was it about him that was different?
I feel like I've been talking the whole time, but I feel like he knew who he was. I mean, when he was an adolescent, he was in the field with his sheep, and the sole responsibility for him was to protect the livelihood, his family's wealth in the herd. And he killed a lion and he killed a bear. But, like, besides the accolades, like, that's the same thing as picking up the barbell. The reps in the ring fighting. When Chris steps into the boxing ring later, which is the analogy for the battlefield with Goliath, Chris is confident, not that he's more skilled than that guy. He could care less about it. He knows who he is, and he knows what he's put in to be there. Yeah, that's the buy-in for the fight. And if you don't have that, good luck.
Well, I think that the foundation for all of this, and the same thing for us that we've spoken about in the past, is that kavod, that glory of God, is living life to the glory of God, right? The things that we do. And so having that in your mind as the firm foundation of everything, the goal, the end of all things, Westminster Confession 1, what's the chief end of man? To glorify God and enjoy him forever. And so you have to remember that we, as we sit here recording this podcast, are thinking, we have the framework in our minds of identity and calling already before the forging. And so you have to remember that that's what's in David's mind. David doesn't go into this situation to fight Goliath because he knows that he needs to rush headlong into the forging process. That's not exactly what's on his mind. When he goes like, ooh, fire, let me go jump in the middle of it. No, he knows who he is and whose he is.
Yeah.
He knows what God has called him to do, to be a man of God. And so what does he do? Why does he kill Goliath? For the glory of God.
Yeah.
Because the glory of God is being shamed by Goliath. That's why he kills him.
So
that's why he cuts off his head.
So what you're saying is perfect, because if you go back and look through this, chapter 17, verse 11, and they were dismayed and greatly afraid. That's the people of Israel. God's people were afraid. So just consider
warriors.
your own life and the people that you hear call themselves a Christian. And just consider the fears, the depression, the anxiety, the worry that they're walking in. And David sees that in his brothers. He sees that in the people of God. And he goes, that's wrong. Whatever's causing that has to die. That's not of God, that they would be afraid like this, right?
They were afraid of a 9-foot giant. We're afraid of sickness and mask and germs and... Like, what is happening?
Seriously.
So it goes down. It goes down into verse 23 and 24, and it says, David heard them. He heard their fear, right? And it says, now all the men of Israel saw the Goliath. And so David's attention is on hearing the men and the cry and the fear in their heart and knowing who God is. The men are focused on Goliath and how tall and how big and what a champion this guy is. It's just a different perspective. If you're looking at situation, if you're listening to the voices around you, your compass is off. You've got to make that change, right?
It's fear of man. Galatians 1:10.
That's what it is.
If I was still afraid of man, I wouldn't be a slave of Christ, right?
And so this goes on, and the incredible thing is in verse 32, David stands in front of Saul and he says, let no man's heart fail on account of him, your servant. On account of him, your servant will go and fight with the Philistine. And so one of his chief motivations is that my brothers are afraid, and that needs to stop. And I'm going to slay the dragon that is causing that. Like, that's incredible. And what do you see after he kills Goliath? This is awesome. The Philistines run, and what happens? All of Israel pursues. And so immediately courage is filled back into them. And that's what's happened. That's what happens when we walk in the calling and in the forging. It causes this ripple effect to the people around us where we get out from the fear that we're trapped in. It's that bridge to reigning, right? It's right at the tail end of this is what it means to really walk in the forging. It causes this overflow of I'm getting secure in my identity and walking in him. It's just it's an incredible portion.
It is. You know, the funny part of the story for me is David asking, because you got to have some confidence to get to this point, right? David's like, so whoever kills him, what do you get? I think he asked twice, right? So whoever kills that dude, tell me again, what do you get? Right? And he's like, I got this, right? But here's a premise.
Marriage, my brothers get encouraged. Like, these are good motivations.
But here's a premise on why he got this. Your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God.
He's walked it out before.
Right? Seeing that he has defied the armies of who?
The living God.
That means he believes in the living God and he understands what he's standing for. There's a lot of spiritual pride in that. You know, any son that's got, your daddy's so-and-so, you take pride in your dad. Well, that's David right there.
So let's put some application to this. I want you guys to start thinking for closure. In light of what we just said, consider your families, consider your children, consider your coworkers, the men around you. There is fear and reasons to be afraid all around, right? I mean, just consider your family circumstances, and they're looking for somebody to have something other than what they have. They're looking for somebody to have this kind of faith that believes that God has more for this struggle that they're in.
You have to fight and be forged in your moment, right? So often we're looking at the teaching and the helping and the ministering to others is in the reigning portion, right? The forging is focused on you, the dross being burnt off of you, right? Like preparing you.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens with David, because what happens with Saul? What does Saul try to do for David to help him out?
Oh, he gives him his armor. Like
He puts on his armor.
Yeah.
And David's like,
This
dude,
will help you.
I'm like 5'6". You're
Get this
6'5".
off of
You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't fit me. So don't try to wear Saul's armor. Don't try to.
That's good.
Don't try to take somebody else's forging process into your own. You need to recognize that God has uniquely fit you and tailored this plan for you to bring you through this. It's for you, right? The forging is to help build you into the man so that when you are reigning, then you can affect others through that.
That's good. Final thoughts, guys.
That was it.
I mean, why we got to add to it?
I got a better one to end on. I got a better one to
else?
end on. Yeah. So I was thinking about this verse the whole time and trying to figure out how to say it. So we'll see if it comes out right. But I think that identity and forge are the two most important pillars out of these four.
Yeah.
Okay. Because if you don't know your identity, you're done. You're done, right? And reigning,
Seriously.
right? But this is the point. Forging is the Christian life.
Yeah.
From day one to the last day, that's the forging. You're forging in some area of your life. And I was thinking about Romans 8:28.
Yeah.
That verse says, we all know that verse, that all things work together for good for those who are called according to God's purpose, right? That all things work together, the Greek word is synergeo. That's where we get our word synergy. The word synergy means that the greater collective whole is greater in value than the individual collective parts, right? A motor is more important than a bolt, right? So what that verse is saying is that the highest of highs of your life and the lowest of lows of your life, all together, that forging, smelting process, all of that from the day of your birth to the day of your death is good.
Yeah.
Works together for good.
You're good.
I mean, that makes you want to run through a wall, right? I mean, that, like, the best and the worst work together for good. And that is forging, right?
Yep.
When you're sitting in the darkness or when you're reigning, all of that works together for good.
Have you seen the little video of the two marbles and one's on a straight path going downhill and the other one dips and rises and dips and rises? And the one that dips and rises smokes the one on a plain path
straight,
every time, even though their height's the same at the end. And that's just a picture of our life, right? We are meant to go through seasons of ups and downs. And I think we'd be wrong to just say, the goal of this sanctification is not just for your glory, it's not for your strength, it's not for your reigning. It's that you would be made into the image of Christ. That's what this is about. It's all about being found in him, because in him is our identity, in him is our value, in him is our calling, in him is everything that God has for us. And so if we miss Christ, we miss everything. We just found a good life here, right? And we don't want to do that. And so
Your best life now. Shout out to Joel Osteen.
that is not what we're after. So stick with us. We've got
Say
more
shout
to
out
come.
Joel Osteen.
Capone Family Podcast. Enjoy.